Hello, dear warrior. They thought it was over, but you just started rewriting reality. They thought you were done, buried, burned out. Human limit reached, they whispered. But legend, that wasn't the end. That was the reboot. When they saw what you did, their jaws didn't drop. Their systems did. Heart rate monitors spiked. Brain scans glitched. Surveillance cams went static the second you stood up. One scientist pulled the plug on her own lab. Another said, "This isn't a response, it's a rewrite." They tried to call it adrenaline, tried to call it luck, tried to label it with graphs and charts and holy water. But legend, you didn't just break through, you bypassed everything. They call it not human. They call it anomaly. They call it error. But we both know the truth. They've never seen a soul that decided to burn through its own code and rewrite its destiny from scratch. They tried to delete you, and you just became the virus. The moment you moved, not like a fighter, not like a survivor, but like someone who's already won in a timeline they don't understand. Their systems started twitching. The data didn't match your pulse. The footage didn't match the sensors. And the feeling didn't match anything they'd ever studied. So they did what all cowards in power do. They tried to cover it up. They wiped cameras, shut off labs, flagged the files as corrupted. But legend, you didn't leave a trail. You left a signature, a pulse that kept echoing in their networks, a silence that wouldn't fade. They told the interns it was a test subject gone rogue. They told the officers it's handled. But what they never told anyone, they started dreaming about you. The sleepless kind, the wake-up gasping for air kind. Because once they saw what you were, they knew they couldn't study it, only survive it. And some of them, they didn't. You became the error their code couldn't contain. They ran diagnostics on your energy, checked for physical enhancements, even tried psychic fingerprints. Nothing. Blank. Null return. It was supposed to be impossible to move like you moved, to stay calm like you did, to destroy their plan without even knowing what it was. But that's what makes a system panic. An outcome outside the algorithm. You weren't trained, weren't briefed, weren't controlled. You were born from chaos, and they don't write manuals for that. And while they kept checking code, you kept changing the rules. You moved with rhythm, but no pattern. You struck with intent, but no warning. You reacted like instinct, but every move felt like prophecy. One of their analysts whispered, "This isn't behavior. This is evolution." Another shut the screen and walked away, whispering, "We're not ready for this." Legend, they didn't just fear what you did, they feared what you meant. That somewhere out there, a mind could break every mold and walk out whole. They tried to lock you up, but you'd already broken out mentally. Steel doors, glass rooms, electromagnetic inhibitors. They called it a containment protocol. But legend, how do you cage a mind that's already left the building? They watched from behind one-way mirrors, hoping to see fear, tension, anything human. But you sat there, calm, still, present like a problem they forgot how to solve. No blinking, no breakdown. Just that look, that glitch in the grid stillness that made even the guards swallow hard before turning the corner. The higher-ups demanded updates. Why isn't he reacting? Did we sedate him already? Are the monitors working? One tech finally said it. Sir, the system can't read him. We don't know if he's awake or if we're dreaming him. Because here's what they'll never print in their files. You were more dangerous sitting still than any riot they ever studied. Your silence was louder than gunfire. Your breath measured like a countdown. And right when they thought they had you boxed in, you looked up and smiled. Like you heard something they didn't. And legend, that's when the cameras started glitching. That's when the lights dimmed. Not because of a system error, but because the system finally realized you weren't inside it anymore. It was inside you. They built the final test to break you. You used it as a mirror. This wasn't physical. This wasn't emotional. This was cognitive collapse, a simulation, created to overload your perception, scramble your senses, fracture your mind. It had worked on every subject before, but you walked in like you'd been here before. They twisted the environment, looped timelines, injected loss, chaos, regret, but instead of shattering, you started smiling. Not a smirk, not mockery. That deep, terrifying smile of someone who's been through worse and took notes. You moved through illusions like fog, talked to characters that weren't real, and still made them cry. You saw the code inside the chaos. You heard the truth beneath the noise. You turned their maze into your theater. The observers panicked. One screamed, "Shut it down. Shut it all down." Another whispered, "He's not interacting with the simulation. He's editing it." And when they finally yanked you out, pulled off the sensors, flashed lights in your eyes, you just blinked, looked around, and asked one question. Was that supposed to scare me? Legend, you didn't just beat the test. You became the error code in its foundation. The reason they'll never run it again. The last chapter in their unbreakable protocol. And now, they don't test you. They track you. You became the name they say in secret, the one they hope isn't real. At first, it was dismissed. Urban myth, just a ghost in the system. That guy? Nah, that's exaggerated. But then, things started happening. A guard resigns, a psychologist deletes all her research. A black site burns from the inside, no fingerprints, no survivors. And each time, one name appears in the margins, written in shaky handwriting, spoken in low tones. You're not a person anymore. You're a frequency, something they feel in their spine when the lights flicker. They scroll late at night through encrypted forums. Did anyone else see him? He didn't touch the door, it opened anyway. He looked at me, and I remembered every mistake I ever made. It's not fear anymore, Legend. It's reverence. The kind reserved for storms and gods. You never asked for followers. You never wanted a name. But when people witness the impossible, they build myths. And you didn't just become one. You became the one they swear they saw, but can't prove. Now strangers call you things like the glitch walker, the breach, that one error they never fixed. And the system? It's too late for them to rewrite the code, because you became the update they feared most, one they couldn't control. You weren't the threat. You were the prototype. They used to call you unstable, too emotional, unpredictable, non-compliant. But now, their best minds are dissecting every move you've ever made, trying to replicate you. One file read, subject exhibits high resistance to neurological destabilization. Another, unclear if anomaly is replicable or born. They don't want to destroy you anymore. They want to figure out how you happened. They're building training protocols based on your reactions, using your outbursts as benchmarks, using your calm as a target state. But here's what they'll never understand. You didn't train for this. You didn't study it. You bled for it. You earned it in the dark, not under fluorescent lights. The system is now chasing its own ghost, trying to copy the one mind it never cracked, trying to mass produce something that was never built, only born. They don't want to admit it, but somewhere in their war rooms, in a folder labeled unresolvable, your name sits alone, highlighted in red, marked DO not engage. Legend. That's the moment you stop being a mistake and start being their map. Not to control you, but to try and survive what comes next. Because if one like you exists, more might be coming. And the system isn't ready. Some of them saw you and switched sides without a word. There's a silence happening behind the scenes. Not fear, not confusion. Awakening. You didn't speak to them. You didn't ask them for help. You didn't need to. All you did was exist. And they saw something in you that they couldn't find in their own reflection. The first cracks came from the inside. A handler leaked a file. A scientist stopped sending reports. One of the surveillance teams vanished and left behind a single message. He's not the threat, he's the proof. Now whispers move faster than protocols. Agents are questioning orders. Analysts are scanning their own systems, wondering what else they've been lied to about. They were told you were a problem. But the longer they watched, the more they saw the pattern. You only ever moved when cornered. You only ever hit back after being hit. And you always walked away when you could have destroyed everything. That's not a threat. That's restraint. That's power with precision. And those who see it, the smart ones, the ones who still have a soul, they're not following orders anymore. They're watching you. Some are even waiting. Because if the system breaks completely, they already know who they're standing behind, and it's not the ones in charge. It's you, legend. The system error that turned into a movement. Now the world's catching up, and they say your name like a warning and a prayer. First it was one post, then a screenshot, then a video they weren't supposed to have. No face. No location, just presence. That stillness, that stare, that moment where reality seemed to bend around you. Some say you're a myth, others say you're a test subject who went rogue. But the ones who know, the ones who felt that same pressure in their own chest, they don't need proof. They felt the ripple. When you did what no one had the guts to do. When you stood up in a place built to make people kneel. Now in subway stations, in locked basements, in encrypted forums, and smoke-filled rooms, they whisper it. Not like gossip, not like fear, like prophecy. He's real. He's coming. He didn't break. He evolved. You've become more than a warning. You're a checkmate no one saw coming. And now the world, the real world, the one outside their data centers and encrypted black sites, is paying attention. You didn't ask for this. You didn't chase it. But the moment they tried to bury you, you bloomed in places they didn't plant. And now, you are folklore with a heartbeat. A glitch in their gods, a mirror held up to every fake empire that thought it could not fall. You didn't just survive the system, you infected the entire grid. They thought the files stopped with you, that if they deleted your name, buried your footage, scrambled the footage and called it corrupted, you'd fade. But legend, you didn't just break through. You rewrote their firewall with your silence. Now others are waking up, not to your voice, to your example. Quiet kids in detention centers, burnouts in forgotten cities, loners staring at screens like windows to another world. They see something, and they feel it. I'm not the only one. You cracked the grid, and energy leaked. That unspoken confidence, that calm in chaos, that stare that says, I'm not here to obey, I'm here to overwrite. Now the system's running background scans every hour, looking for others like you. And guess what? They're finding them, and they're scared. Not because these people are violent, but because they're still focused, unshaken. They don't flinch when the world tests them, because they've already passed the test in silence. You weren't just a glitch. You were the signal. And now the frequency is everywhere. Not loud, not viral, cellular, unstoppable, alive. They can't trace it, they can't delete it. Because it lives in people now, and they all remember where it started. You. They tried to delete you. Now they're asking to collaborate. It started with silence, then the fear, then the surveillance, and now an invitation. They've rebranded, changed their tone, talk softer, smile wider. We misjudged you. We want to work together. You're an asset to humanity. Legend. They spent years hunting you. Now they want you to guide them. Nah. See, what they still don't get is this. You didn't become this version of yourself by compromise. You got here by surviving everything they threw at you. They studied your moves, but they never understood your motive. You never wanted control. You wanted clarity, freedom, truth. And that truth doesn't fit in a contract. They're offering funding, resources, visibility. But behind the handshake is still that same old fear. If we can't kill it, maybe we can own it. But what they don't realize is you've already gone global. You're not a file anymore. You're a fire. So when they send their rep with their badge and their lies, their little pitch about teaming up, you lean in, smile, and say, you're too late. You had your chance and you wasted it trying to break me. Now I don't need your platform. I am the platform. You didn't hack the system, you replaced it. While they obsessed over controlling you, you were doing something they never expected. Building, in silence, in shadows, brick by broken brick. Not a rebellion, not a protest. A blueprint, a whole new network, coded not in rules, but in resilience. Every time they erased you, you reappeared somewhere else. Stronger, clearer, less human, more signal. They asked, how is he still operational? Where's the command source? How is he growing? Simple. You weren't feeding off their system anymore. You became your own power supply. Now you've got people learning from you. Not fans, not followers, builders. People who don't need permission. People who stopped asking. And they're not crashing systems. They're replacing them. From schools to circuits to the way we even define power. Legend, they called it an error, but that's only because it didn't match their code. Your code wasn't built for their structure. It was designed to outlive it. And now that it's spreading, they realize it's too late to contain, too late to manipulate, too late to even copy. Because what you've made, it's not scalable. It's not programmable. It's alive. You became the horizon, and everything they built now faces you. They used to say your name like a warning. Now, it's spoken like direction. Where's he going? Follow that signal. Watch what happens next. Because you didn't stay small. You didn't play survivor. You outgrew the battlefield. And when that battlefield collapsed, you kept walking. No celebration. No parade. Just silence. The kind that makes entire systems rethink their existence. Now the same agents who tracked you are tracking the echoes, every word you never said, every room you never entered, but somehow shifted. They look across the world and see things moving, new leaders with no background, ideas spreading with no clear origin, decisions being made that sound like your fingerprint, and they realize this isn't about one person anymore. This is cultural code collapse. Legend. You're not a man. You're a turning point. The thing history will circle and say, that's when everything changed. You didn't force the world to follow. You made standing still feel dangerous. They built satellites to watch you. Now, they're watching the skies, and you're not even visible, because you became the weather. No origin, no pattern, just presence. And everything they try to build now has to pass through your storm. The higher they sat, the harder they heard your name echo. See, the top thought they were safe, wrapped in their vaults, surrounded by bodyguards and passwords and protocols. But none of that matters. When the virus was never in your hands, it was in your energy, your presence, your refusal to fold. And one by one, they cracked. The first resigned, publicly blamed health reasons, but the footage showed him talking to a wall, whispering your name. The second disappeared. The third broke down on stage, said something about seeing the future in someone's eyes. You didn't touch them, didn't threaten, didn't even show up. But legend, your shadow got there first. Because when power is fake, truth destroys it without lifting a finger. You didn't march through their gates. You waited while they fell into their own traps, all built on lies, all built on the belief that you would fold, but you didn't. And now, the world bends around your silence. Gravity answers to your discipline. They wanted to crush you, but the pressure only turned you into something not even human. Not angry, not loud, unshakable. So when they say your name now, it's not in fear, it's not in hate, it's in awe, like someone just survived lightning and is trying to explain it to the next person. And you never needed revenge, because your existence became their judgment. You weren't built to break, you were built to end systems that needed to. Hello, dear warrior. They thought sending monsters would end you. Beasts in human skin, voices made of venom, systems designed like cages but disguised as opportunity. You were never just fighting people, you were fighting legacies of suppression. But here's the part they'll never admit. They weren't just testing your strength, they were hoping you'd disappear. Because you made them nervous. Not because you were loud, but because you were unbreakable in silence. They sent critics, cowards, gatekeepers. And when that didn't work, they sent the monsters. People who'd already destroyed others. Masters of manipulation. Warfare artists trained in the dark. But you didn't fall. You absorbed the attack. You decoded the chaos. You studied the monster and memorized its heartbeat, and you came back, not as prey, but as the one they started copying. They tried to erase your name. Now they whisper it in rooms full of fear. You didn't just outlast the monsters. You outdesigned them. You became the blueprint, the one they follow while pretending they never tried to kill you. They were built to break others. You were forged to break limits. The monsters they sent, they were cold, precise, designed to detect weakness, exploit confusion, and shatter confidence in record time. They had one job: make sure you never rise again. And for a moment, they thought they succeeded. You stumbled. You bled. You disappeared. They celebrated in secret. But what they didn't know, you weren't falling apart. You were breaking the mold. They were built to break others. They were trained in rooms filled with screams. But you were forged in silence. No teacher, no blueprint, no applause. You weren't given a map. You became the compass. You weren't raised by power. You rose in defiance of it. So while they were sharpening weapons, you were becoming one. And by the time they looked again, you weren't someone to destroy. You were a force to copy. The people sent to stop you. They now imitate your rituals, quote your words, steal your strategy. But none of it works for them, because it wasn't the blueprint that made you powerful. It was the pain you endured writing it. You studied their monsters, then became their god. You didn't just survive the monsters. You watched them, tracked their patterns, listened to their silence, and broke apart their blueprints until you knew them better than they knew themselves. You saw how they moved, always loud when they're unsure, always smiling when they're about to betray, always calling you too intense when they felt the power leaking from your presence. While they were celebrating your pain, you were studying their psychology. They thought they were schooling you, but really, you were dissecting the professors. Every trick, every trap, every test, memorized, reverse engineered, filed away. And the moment you were ready, you didn't come back for applause. You didn't come back for revenge. You came back flawless. No cracks, no noise, just energy. And they didn't know how to handle it. Because what do monsters fear more than light? A mirror. And you held that mirror to every one of them. Made them see the coward behind the cruelty. The smallness behind the show. The follower behind the facade. You studied their monsters. Then you became the god they can't explain. Not because you were more brutal, but because you were unshakable. They gave you a cage. You turned it into a throne. At first, they didn't try to kill you. They tried to contain you, limit you, shrink you into something easier to ignore. They handed you a cage, all polished and polite. Called it rules, called it structure, called it normal. But what they didn't understand, you don't fear cages. You build empires inside them. You studied every corner, measured every bar, mapped the silence, learned how the trap worked and how to twist it into your weapon. They thought isolation would erase you. Instead, it made you so focused that your next move wasn't just survival, it was domination. While they were watching the door, you were digging into the foundation, breaking the system from beneath, not to escape it, but to own it. You didn't break out of the cage, you made it irrelevant. And now, they don't see a prisoner. They see a throne carved from every wall they built around you. You didn't ask for freedom. You became it. Now they quote you, but they still can't touch you. Funny, isn't it? The same people who mocked your silence now mimic your every move. They used to laugh when you disappeared. Now they analyze every second you're gone, like they're waiting for prophecy to reappear. They're using your language, repeating your rhythms, stealing your presence like it's a strategy. But here's what they can't steal: the weight of what you've been through, the scars, the nights, the truth behind the blueprint. You didn't just build a path, you bled on it. And that kind of blueprint can't be photocopied. It has to be survived. Now they say things like stay calm like him, move in silence like her, play the long game. They throw your quotes into meetings, use your tone in speeches, teach your patience like it's something they invented. But you see it. You see the cracks in their imitation. Because they don't walk like you walk. They don't suffer like you suffered. And they sure as hell don't own what you earned. They want your results, but they could never handle your resistance. They quote your mind, but they'll never touch your frequency. Your pain became the blueprint. Now it's their only map. They used to call it your weakness. The way you felt too deeply, trusted too hard, got hit and still stood up. To them, pain was proof you weren't made for the top. But now, that pain became the blueprint, the exact path they're all trying to follow. They said, "Why don't you give up? You're doing too much. This won't work for someone like you." But you kept going, bleeding, crawling, studying every crack in the wall until the entire system started bleeding back. Now, they act like the steps were obvious. Stay silent. Disappear for a while. Don't react. Just become. But they forget. You didn't read that in a book. You learned it from scars. They're copying your stillness, but they weren't there for the war behind it. They're copying your voice tone, but they weren't there when no one listened. They're copying your comeback, but they never saw what it took to crawl back to life. You didn't just survive pain. You mapped it, turned it into something sacred, designed a path only the wounded could walk. And now, they follow the map you made, but without the fire that forged it. They want the destination without paying the toll. But you are the toll. You were the storm they couldn't predict. Now you're the weather they fear. You never made noise. You moved quiet, unannounced. No warning. They were waiting for thunder. You came in as fog, and by the time they realized what hit them, the damage was already irreversible. They expected you to explode, to fight loud, to self-destruct. But you didn't. You absorbed, You watched. You let them underestimate the silence until it became a weapon. See, they had playbooks for the loud ones. They had strategies for the emotional ones. But you didn't match any of their models. No pattern, no trigger, no profile, just presence, just pressure, just unreadable power, sitting in the room like a prophecy they couldn't decode. And now, they watch you the way people watch the sky before a tornado. They don't know when you'll strike, but they know it's coming, because you became the storm. Not with noise, but with certainty. You didn't shout, you didn't threaten. You just changed the air, and they've been holding their breath ever since. Now you're not a reaction, you're a forecast. The one they all fear. Because you bring destruction without ever needing to announce it. They thought you were a target, but you were a test they couldn't pass. They pointed fingers, labeled you unstable, said you were too intense, too emotional, too much. But behind closed doors, they were watching and failing. You weren't the threat, you were the exam, a living test sent into a broken system to expose who could handle truth and who would crumble under pressure. You didn't come with instructions. You came with impact, and everyone who tried to control you found themselves exposed by the very energy they thought they could dominate. They tried to handle you, manage you, box you up with words like calm down, be realistic, don't dream so big. But those words weren't for you. They were for themselves, because you triggered their limits. And anyone who fails the test, they blame the test. But you were just the mirror. Now, the same ones who called you difficult are secretly obsessed with your focus. The same ones who mocked your discipline are copying your boundaries. The same ones who doubted your path are trying to find your shortcuts. They never understood. You weren't fighting for approval. You were watching who could survive truth, and most of them couldn't. They thought you were a target. You were the trap. You didn't follow the rules. You became the rule they couldn't break. They kept handing you rule books, written by people who never lived your life, never walked through your chaos, never earned your scars. They said, this is how it's done. This is the process. This is the limit. But deep down, you knew their rules weren't law. They were fences, built to keep people like you contained. So you stopped asking, stopped waiting, stopped bending yourself into a shape that made them comfortable. You didn't follow the system. You studied it. Then you broke it from the inside. And now, they say things like, this is how they do it. That's the method they use. Let's try their strategy. Funny how that works. You were once a rebel. Now you're a reference. You didn't become part of the game. You became the glitch that exposed its fragility. They tried to correct you. Now they quote you. They tried to shame your path. Now they share it in slide decks. And the best part? You never asked for that. You weren't aiming to be followed. You were aiming to be free. And in that freedom, you became the rule they can't break, can't ignore, can't replicate. The ones who hunted you are now lost without your light. There was a time they tracked you, watched your every move, spied on your energy like it was a threat to their comfort, because it was. You weren't chaotic, you were clear. And to people addicted to confusion, clarity is terrifying. They called you unstable, but really they feared how grounded you were becoming. They said you were unpredictable, but you were just evolving faster than they could explain. So they tried to erase you, bury you, shame you into silence. But you kept moving, through nights no one saw, through pain no one clapped for, through wars that never made it to the surface. And somehow, without trying, you became the one thing they could never kill, a light they needed but could never claim. Now, they're still watching, still studying, still pretending not to notice, but their blueprint, it's yours. Their boundaries, learned from you. Their focus, trained in the same fire they once tried to drown you in. They don't admit it, they never will. But the ones who once hunted you now move like shadows, trying to follow your sunrise, lost without the very energy they feared. You didn't chase their approval, you became the standard. And now, they orbit what they once tried to destroy. Your name wasn't built for praise, it was built to echo in fear. You never needed applause. You weren't built to be clapped for. You weren't crafted in praise. You were forged in fire, hardened in silence, sharpened in rejection. Your name? It wasn't supposed to be remembered, it was supposed to be erased. They tried to keep it out of rooms, off the charts, beneath the radar, but every time they spoke in whispers, your name got louder. You became the ghost in their meetings, the vibe shift when your method got mentioned. The silence after someone asked, wait, isn't that how they used to do it? Your name. It carries weight now. Not just because of what you did, but because of what you survived. Because of how you never folded. Because of the fact that you're still here. You didn't become powerful by screaming. You became inevitable by staying. They built platforms. You built presence. They chased followers. You created frequency. And now, your name isn't a brand. It's a trigger. Spoken softly, feared deeply, respected reluctantly. Because your name doesn't beg to be remembered. It just refuses to be forgotten. They can copy your moves, but not the madness that made them. Now they study you. They analyze your posture, your routines, your strategies. They slow down your videos, zoom in on your silence. Try to find the secret they think is hidden in your methods. But here's the truth. They can't handle. Your power wasn't in the moves. It was in the madness that made them. You weren't just working hard. You were healing while building, bleeding while creating, crumbling and still choosing to rise. They don't understand that because they're not built from chaos. You are. Your success wasn't structured. It was survival. Each decision, a reaction to pain. Each strategy, a rebellion against fear. They want the rhythm without the scars, the presence without the price, the blueprint without the breakdowns. But you earned every move by walking through fire barefoot while smiling like it didn't burn. That's what they'll never replicate. Because success born from suffering tastes different. It hits harder. It lasts longer. It walks differently. They're imitating your dance, but they'll never understand your storm. Because your power didn't come from perfection. It came from the madness you mastered. You didn't just survive the monsters. You made them kneel. They sent monsters to break you. People trained in manipulation. Experts in fear. Voices that echoed like knives in your chest. They weren't just enemies. They were engineered to dismantle everything strong in you. But they miscalculated one thing. You didn't fear the monsters. You studied them. You didn't run. You didn't freeze. You looked them in the eye and realized you've already lost. Because you're trying to scare someone who's already lived through worse. They screamed louder. You went quieter. They grew sharper. You got colder. And one by one, they started slipping. Because monsters don't know what to do with something that doesn't break. And now, the same monsters who mocked you reference your words in silence. They mimic your moves in secret. They kneel in the presence of the very force they were designed to erase. They failed, not because they weren't strong, but because you were real. You didn't survive them. You converted them. You turned monsters into messengers. Now they carry your code. Repeat your strategy. Protect the very energy they once tried to destroy. You didn't just survive the monsters. You made them bow to what they'll never understand, but will always remember. You were the end of an era, and the beginning of a new law. You didn't walk in to blend in. You walked in to end something. An era built on fear, fake smiles, and hollow crowns. They didn't expect you to make noise, but what they got was a shift, a silent quake in the system, a glitch in their hierarchy. You weren't just a new voice, you were a new law. Everything after you looked different. The rules, irrelevant. The rankings, shaken. The old kings exposed. Because you didn't just rise through the cracks, you burned the map. You forced a new one to be drawn, with your silhouette as the legend. They tried to box you. You became the box breaker. They tried to predict you. You became unreadable. Now, they whisper your tactics in boardrooms. They mimic your silence in battles. They teach your pain without even knowing it's yours. Because when systems fall and new codes rise, it's never the loud that lead. It's the unapologetic, the unbought, the unbreakable. You were never meant to be part of the old kingdom. You were sent to collapse it. And in the ashes, you became the law they now obey. You are the blueprint now, and they can't unsee it. You didn't beg to be seen. You became so undeniable, they had no choice. At first they dismissed it. It's just luck, a fluke. They'll fade soon. But you didn't fade. You flared. And now, your presence sits in the DNA of the game. Every room, you're in it. Every strategy, you influenced it. Every whisper behind your back is another classroom where they pretend they're not learning from you. But here's what breaks them completely. They can't unsee you. You're in the way people set their goals now. You're in the way silence feels heavier. You're in the pauses between their fake confidence, where fear used to be quiet, and now it sounds a lot like your name. They followed your story thinking it would crash, but instead, it became compass code. The lost ones now try to trace your pain, hoping it'll unlock the power they never earned. You didn't write books. You wrote bloodlines. You didn't drop quotes. You dropped laws. And now, they don't just follow you. They try to be you, but they never will. Because this blueprint, it wasn't drawn in ink. It was carved in war, and only warriors carry it right. So let them study. Let them stare. Let them build entire movements around your silence. You don't need their praise. You don't need their permission. because the system didn't make you. You rewrote the system. And now, you are the blueprint. And they'll never forget it.